gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The show starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
What is going on, CaneSport? It is Azubi Charles, and good morning to you all. It is May 11th, 2023, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us on Good Morning CaneSport. Today, I'm joined by Steven Wagner as we break down the news of the day, and there's plenty of it coming by way of recruiting news. But first off, last week I had the chance to make it out to Miami Central to speak with Miami Central head coach Jude Joseph, and he had some very, very interesting things to say. I spoke with him about upcoming spring ball, some new players that they brought in. And the biggest thing was really Miami Hurricanes recruiting. When I asked him, what are his thoughts? Obviously, he's been around, South Florida. He knows the game. Miami's recruited that school very, very hard recently. He told me, he said, hey, I feel like Cristobal is doing what Schnellenberger did back in the day with kind of the state of Miami, really recruiting Palm Beach, Dade, and Broward kind of really hard. And he really, really likes Coach Cristobal. One thing I asked him as well was, hey, as a head coach, why do you feel comfortable sending your players to Coach Cristobal? And he said, plain and simple, he's not a car salesman. He keeps it real and he keeps it straightforward to all the guys. And that's something he can appreciate and his players can appreciate. A lot of insightful stuff in that story with Coach Jude Joseph, so make sure to check that out as well. Another big story that we have on site this morning is with massive Miami priority target Justin Scott. Steven, you spoke with Scott, got in with him a little bit, talked to him some things. What were your impressions and biggest takeaway from that conversation with Justin Scott?
Yeah, we knew that Miami was in a really good position coming off of that week-long unofficial visit that he took back in April, where he had the chance to watch a pair of practices and then the spring game, and Miami really made him feel like a priority target. He's had his official visit to Miami locked in since February, but now it's really starting to feel like Miami's in a really, really good position with Justin Scott. He's the number 11 overall prospect in the class, number 3 defensive lineman, and the top recruit in the state of Illinois. Make no mistake, he has a chance to be this class's Francis Malagoa. It just really being that big, massive signature recruit that Miami's able to land. Last year, we saw Miami really beef up along the offensive line. This year, it looks like Miami's putting themselves in a really good position along the defensive line. And I think that Miami is going to I think that Miami has a really, really good chance at landing Justin Scott. The RPM started favoring him after he took that week-long visit to Miami, and things really took off with the Canes. I think Miami is in. I don't think you could ask to be in a much better spot with Justin Scott if you were Miami. Jason Taylor had the chance to get out to his school and visit him check up on him last week, because I forgot this is this is the NCAA, and apparently there's like a restraining order on talking to players or some stupid BS like that. But that's a rant for another time. But Jason Taylor had the chance to get out there last week along with Lance Guidry. And then Joe Salavea made the trip up to Chicago to see him on Tuesday. So we're talking about Miami getting out there twice within an 8-day span. You're getting Miami's defensive line coach, both their co-defensive line coaches, both played in the NFL. One of them's got a gold jacket, and the defensive coordinator all getting out there in an 8-day span. That really hit Justin Scott big. It's really showing him that Miami thinks of him as that kind of a priority target. And I think that's helping Miami maybe get a little bit of separation from some of these schools. Georgia is obviously another school that he's got Novi locked into. Notre Dame has been a school that's been pushing hard. He's also going to visit Ohio State and Michigan this summer. But and just about every program in the country is making a trip out to see him at some point during this evaluation period. But overall, I don't think you could ask to be in a much better place if you were Miami.
Yeah, I really love hearing, 2 coaches in 8 days, that 1-2 punch of Jason Taylor and Joe Salavea.
Three coaches in 8 days when you include the defensive coordinator.
Jesus Christ, yeah, I forgot about that too. But I feel like Miami's putting that full court press on Justin Scott. And even after the spring game when we talked to him, he really, really left Miami saying, "Hey, I think Coral Gables is for me. I think the Hurricanes might be a program I really, really consider." So I'm really glad to see Miami continuing to apply that pressure and say, "Hey, you're our top guy in this class. We want you to come to Miami." So hopefully, at the end of the day, it pays off for the Hurricanes. But as of now, it looks like Miami's in a really, really good spot with Scott. And then just kind of going back to recruiting at Miami Central, another story that we have on site this morning is with 2025 four-star quarterback Beckham Kritza. He's one of the California kids that came down to South Florida. He just talked about, the Hurricanes, and he was at the spring game as well. What he told me is he really, really loves Shannon Dawson's offense. And with him being a West Coast guy, obviously West Coast quarterbacks are known for airing the ball out, running that air raid. So he loves what he saw from Dawson's offense in the spring game. And he's going to be playing in South Florida, so he's going to be right in the Hurricanes' backyard. And that's something that he's really, really excited about, having the opportunity to connect with Miami, taking that 20, 30-minute drive down to Coral Gables, or having the coaches come out to him and say, "Hey, this is what we like, but this is what we also want you to work on." So Beckham Kritza is a guy that, is kind of picking up momentum in that 2025 class, and now a South Florida quarterback that Miami can really, really target in that next cycle. Steven, you also spoke with 2025 defensive lineman Jalen Williams, who is a top 300 prospect in his class. Just what were your thoughts on that conversation? What is he saying about Miami?
Yeah, the big takeaways that I'm seeing here with most of these defensive linemen is the Jason Taylor hire is paying off in a massive way. It's really seeming like Jason Taylor's hire was probably one of the best recruiting hires, additions to a coaching staff from a recruiting standpoint, really in the country this year, aside from obviously coordinators, because coordinators are known for having massive reach, and that's but among position coaches, Jason Taylor has definitely been an absolutely massive addition. Now, whether or not he's going to be able to develop these kids, obviously this is his first time as a college position coach. He comes here with experience coaching at the high school level when he was the defensive coordinator and the defensive line coach over at St. Thomas Aquinas. So he's already coached, pretty high level talent as it is. He's coached some of these prospects already. But now that he's in this position where he's going to be, on the other side of things, where he's going to be up here at the college level, the pressure will be on him to develop these kids. But at least from a recruiting standpoint, this is putting Miami in the room, in the conversation with just about everyone in the country. I mean, I remember hearing, or every defensive line prospect in the country. I remember hearing people talking about whenever Deion Sanders was hired at Colorado, saying that this is going to get Colorado in the room with every prospect in the country, just because it's going to be one of these things where, hey, you've got Prime on the phone calling you. You're going to at least take that call and hear what he has to say. You're not going to slam the door. Well, same thing with Jason Taylor. You've got Jason Taylor on the phone calling you. Even if you're not that interested, you're at least going to hear what he has to say. And that's a lot more than Miami can ask, or that Miami could have asked for with a lot of these prospects, because Miami's defensive line is undoubtedly one of the bigger their interior defensive line is undoubtedly one of the bigger weaknesses kind of on the roster. And defensive line as a whole has been a spot that's been pretty inconsistent, really over the last couple of years. But I think that Jason Taylor is giving Miami a fantastic chance with a lot of these kids, including Williams, and he spoke very highly of Miami and kind of the opinion that he has of the Canes.
Yeah, I've said it once and I'll say it a million times again. The Jason Taylor effect is kind of, I feel like, one of the best hires or inner team promotions that Miami did this weekend. Put in a Hall of Famer on field position, having him go inside of a kid's home, saying, "Hey, I've got to go jacket. Come play for Miami. Hopefully I can get you one. I can get you next level, develop you." And like you said, a lot of prospects that I've spoken to as well, the biggest thing they say, "Hey, Jason Taylor's the guy down there. I really want to see what he's all about. I want to see what the Hurricanes are about. And I want to see if I can develop under him and go to that next level." So I really, really love the Jason Taylor hire from Mario Cristobal. So applause to him for that. And kind of staying on the recruiting note, another 2026 prospect out of Maryland, St. Francis, got an offer. So make sure to go check out that story as well. And I didn't want to really dive into that. But, Steven, I want to ask you, seems like Miami is really, really hitting Maryland, Virginia, that whole DMV area really, really hard, kind of known as Big Ten countries, competing against Penn States and Ohio States and things like that. Just what are your thoughts on Miami kind of expanding, not really expanding, but really targeting that area, dishing out a lot of offers specifically to St. Francis as well?
Yeah, so Miami's really looking at that area, I think, in kind of a supplementary fashion. Obviously, if Miami's winning the state of Florida every single year, Miami never needs to go anywhere. Same thing with programs out in California and Texas, and Georgia in recent years too. If you win that state, if you're a school within that state and you can win the recruiting battle in that state, you never need to leave your state. You will never have a talent deficiency. But I think what we're seeing Miami do is they really want to focus heavily on grabbing in-state talent, like guys in their own backyard, and then some IMG kids, and really guys, all across the state of Florida. And they kind of want to use St. Francis as a supplementary school, a place where they can dip in and grab some of the supplementary talent. Pick up a linebacker here, a receiver there, a tight end here, because I think Miami also understands that as far as building a mainstream pipeline, they'll probably never be able to get all of their prospects from St. Francis. That's probably not going to be the heavy grounds that they're going to be able to dominate. Virginia, Maryland, the whole DMV area, that's probably not going to be a Miami strong suit, because historically that has been Big Ten country. That's been Big Ten stomping grounds. That's where Michigan goes and Ohio State goes and Penn State goes, and all of these programs up in the Big Ten that are really putting themselves in the national championship picture. But I think Miami's kind of figuring to themselves, hey, maybe we can grab a guy here, maybe we can grab a guy there, and we'll be able to plug any holes that we might have on our roster with maybe a little bit of talent that we have up here. And there's certainly no lack of talent up there. St. Francis is basically the IMG of the Northeast whenever you see the level of talent that goes to this school. I mean, heck, IMG and St. Francis played last season. IMG only had one loss all year. That was to Miami Central. But outside of that, St. Francis was the only team that played them within I think like 12 points or something like that. St. Francis was the only other school in the country that was able to keep it close. So that should tell you something about the level of talent that St. Francis has. They've also got Michael Van Buren up there. He's a quarterback who I think right now is currently RPM'd to Oregon. But he was a guy who Miami was after kind of earlier in the year. And he's another one of those really elite quarterback talents. He's another really elite talent more generally. So yeah, again, just kind of giving you an idea of the kind of talent that is up there in this area. But definitely Miami is seeing this as a place where they can occasionally dip in and grab a few pieces.
Yeah, I watched St. Francis play last year in Florida versus Venice, and they are a loaded team. I watched Michael Van Buren before he was kind of that big prospect. I'm like, who is this guy? And then on the defense side of the ball, they got guys flying around everywhere. Also, 2023 year, they're coming down to South Florida, and we'll be playing Shamadan Madonna this year in Broward versus the world kind of matchup. So definitely excited to see St. Francis come down here and compete with one of the top teams, not only in South Florida, but the country as well. Also on the site this morning, we have an update with former Cane Bruce Brown, who had himself a night for the Denver Nuggets 2 days ago, scoring 25 points off the bench, and kind of the second consecutive day we see a Hurricane, step up and be that big guy for a playoff team off the bench. First, Lonnie Walker with his amazing fourth quarter performance for the Lakers, and the next day, Bruce Brown with that 25-point output for the Nuggets. So make sure to check out that on the site as well. Also, we continue our series of counting down our top 50 players post-spring. Now we're at number 43. We check out Frank Latson, the Clemson transfer that came into Miami last season. Battled through a little bit of an injury, but hopefully this year he can kind of kick that to the curb and really show what he's all about. So make sure to check out that update on Frank Latson. To wrap up our recruiting news this morning, we have Bit of sad news for the Hurricanes. Steven, you put in an RPM prediction for Columbus 2024 defensive lineman Dylan Stevenson of Florida State. Just talk to me about that decision. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Just all that good stuff.
Yeah, communication with Dylan Stevenson, it's kind of steadily started to fall off a little bit. Miami has cooled on him. Doesn't really feel like this is a guy who Miami has lost in a recruiting battle. More like a guy who Miami has maybe started to move off a little bit. He was getting a lot of attention from the Canes early. He was getting a lot of love from Miami early, but now communication is starting to decrease a little bit. And Florida State has been really consistent and stayed really hot on Dylan Stevenson's tail really throughout this whole process. Stevenson told War Chant a couple of weeks ago, I believe, that Miami, Florida State, Auburn, and Stanford were going to be some of the really big schools that were going to really be factoring in there. And he had the chance to visit Florida State and Auburn, and I can't remember if he had a chance to get out to Stanford this spring. But Miami was previously the favorite to land Dylan Stevenson. It's now seeming like that's probably flipped to Florida State. And I think Florida State's actually the new leader in the RPM. And, again, this isn't so much, losing a recruiting battle so much as it kind of seems like Miami's just going after maybe other guys or for whatever reason. Miami is kind of cooling things off a little bit. They're not really talking as much, but Florida State is staying really, really consistent. They're showing him how much they love him, how much they want him. He has an official visit set to Florida State. He said that he's going to announce a few more here later this month. Didn't give a specific date, but he's probably going to commit sometime over the fall before his senior football season. And I would now be surprised if that ended up being Miami. Previously, it really looked like Miami was going to be him, but they've since cooled off. Sometimes, we put in these RPMs, but sometimes new intel comes out, new information comes out that completely suggests something else. And so that's a big reason why I flipped my prediction for Stevenson from Miami to Florida State.
Yeah, throughout the spring, Dylan Stevenson was a guy that was on campus a lot in Coral Gables, down there at practices and things like that. So a little bit surprising seeing, Florida State come in and kind of take that lead role. But, hey, we've seen them do it before. We've seen them come in and swoop LaWayne McCoy. And the Seminoles are always recruiting really, really hard in South Florida and have a lot of ties down here. So very interesting to see how this Dylan Stevenson story develops as we move on forward. And for, just the recruiting battles, that's something I'm really excited to see about. I remember last cycle we had the big Ruben Bain, Florida State, Miami recruiting battle. So fully expect to see that continue throughout the 2024 class, and excited to see that as well. That is all that we have for this episode of Good Morning CaneSport. Make sure to check out all our wonderful stories on the site this morning and anything else that might pop up. For Stephen Wagner, I'm Azubi Charles. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.